Hello, OmnusIans. I am Rob, here at the lair of OmnusI, with another State of the Dungeon address. Today is the 27th of April. We are charging hard towards May. And tonight was a Werewolves of the Caribbean. Once again, not in the Caribbean, but heading back. If you're ready, we can continue on with the story of the adventures of Peter, Aiden, Nikolai, Nathan, Vlad, and Grace. So, our frisky werewolves were getting ready to take the next step of their quest to retrieve the Phoenix Dagger, which had been stolen by Aiden's brother and handed over to a spirit of a powerful trickster known as the Raven Queen. So the Silverfangs had arranged for a stealth moon bridge to be erected as close to the location of the dagger as they could, without giving them any advanced knowledge of exactly where they were going to go. In truth, the Silverfangs weren't entirely certain either. They were just guided by the spirits. The party set forth. I gave them one last chance to get whatever else they thought they might need. Sometimes having the right gear can be handy, but they thought that they were prepared enough, so they left. And they passed through the moon bridge. I ensured that they remembered the warning that they were given the previous time, not to leave the moon bridge for any reason, and to not leave physical contact with the moon bridge, or else disaster would soon follow. So as they were moving along the moon bridge, I explained to them the scenario. It's this huge, arching, nearly invisible path going up through the sky of the spirit world, leaving the land to spread out beneath them. And as they traveled, the ground got tinier and tinier, and the details got less and less, and the visions of the Celestials above them, the different constellations and the heroes that were outlined, grew heroes of old. And the spiritual embodiments of such things as the planets and great concepts that were dealing in their own eternal dance in the heavens. So as they got higher, they got up to the cloud layer, and they saw some wonders in the clouds. Also, they saw a huge giant that was in the middle of the clouds. It was being poked by loons that were trying to get it out of the path that it had stumbled upon. Even though it hadn't seen the path, it was still a big, powerful spirit moving fairly stupidly. It appeared to be a huge anthropomorphic, 18-foot tall being made out of clouds. So the party decided to help the loons out and attack it. And their blows didn't have a great deal of effect at first. It wasn't until Aiden started swinging some really powerful blows and chopping large chunks out of the spirit's power that it was having a lot of effect. The spirit, for its act, tried smashing Nikolai. It hit him pretty hard, but that only opened it up for Aiden to jump to the fore and start attacking it in earnest. The others tried different things. Vlad tried shooting it with his gun that works in the spirit world. Did very little damage. The thing wasn't easy to hurt. But when they were starting to do 10 points of damage at a swing and some pretty impressive shots, they quickly chopped the thing down. Werewolves have rage. The spirit had none. It had one powerful blow that crushed down Aiden a little. He took some damage, but it wasn't aggravated. He just was... It was a fight for the sake of giving them a nice, solid fight where they felt that they could contribute together. And they beat it down and discorporated the creature. This was a kind of a lesson about not being good guys or bad guys, but just getting some good, solid combats in so that they could all get a chance to use these various abilities of just being werewolves. So they continued along on their path after defeating the Cloud Giant. Oh, I suppose I should say one other thing, too. Another thing of note, Peter still has that shadow tendril that he can call upon in his hand, and it still has this problem that it magpies abilities from supernatural creatures that he hits with it. So he did manage to hit the Cloud Giant, and when he did that, he rolled rather well. The Cloud Giant didn't roll very well. It's not a very intelligent creature, and he absorbed some of its ability to... Well, honestly, he doesn't know what the ability is, and since he may very well watch this video, we'll just draw it short and say that he leached an ability off of the great thing. They continued on and started actually passing among the celestial bodies. When they got to Mars, they passed Luna and got their gnosis renewed. Had a chance to pick up, and develop their gnosis a little bit by passing close to the Maiden of the Moon. But they didn't have the experience to really do that. So some of them got a little bit of a gnosis bonus that can pay for different abilities that they have or absorb gnosis lost from other outlets. In the form of gnosis cookies. I just gave them gnosis cookies. So then they went up alongside of Mars, and Mars noticed warriors coming by and decided to challenge them. So a powerful warrior appeared to stand in front of the moon bridge. And this was a battle to let them fight a really powerful foe if they wanted to, or to use their cleverness to avoid a pitched battle. And it was kind of half and half. Aiden, of course, stepped forward, ready to fight to defend his pack, and he swiped at it. Turned out the spirit was quite powerful, and it was able to take his blows, and every time he lashed out at it, it would try parrying his blows. The warrior appeared to be a hugely armored, very, very strong warrior with a spear and a shield. When Aiden came up with his claws, no weapon in hand, those weapons turned into rods. As a joke, this appeared to be Mars. He was dressed in kind of Greek armor, a breastplate, a Greek drop helm, greaves, bracers. They turned into rods that, as a joke, I called them Mars bars for a bit. That was funny. And the group tried fighting it. The problem was the moon bridge itself was described as only being a person wide. So if they wanted to get by somebody, they had to scooch at peril of falling off the moon bridge. Nobody did that, fortunately, but that led to some interesting scenarios. In one case, Vlad barged through the party to move up in the battle against Mars. He didn't want to be left behind not doing much. I don't think he'd even reloaded his pistol, honestly. So he charged up towards the fray. Aiden realized that, he was going to try to distract us so the others could get by, and he ended up engaging it. He put up his Luna's armor intelligently before the fight so that he was more resilient. When Peter tried dashing by, since it was fleeing, the spirit had a charm that allowed it an attack on anybody who was doing a combat action against it. And it included flight as a combat action. He was trying to run through his threatening area. So, it whacked him and knocked him off the bridge. Now, this was a serious thing. They were told not to leave the bridge. What turned out is, once they left the bridge was no longer visible to them. If they could even fly up on their own power, they were extremely unlikely to find it. So, what happened was, Peter, again, thinking quickly, he used his shadow tendril to lash out and hook Peter and reel him up. Reel Nathan, the Get of Fenris, up. And he successfully did so, snagging his leg and moving him up. As a note, I've been using this hit location die, the 12-sided die. This thing is a little twisted. It almost seems like there's a sadistic hand that chooses locations when it would be inappropriate or funny. But he lashed out and grabbed his leg and started pulling him up. Then Vlad tried running around the thing. Peter had just landed Nathan and got him up there by the time Vlad got power knocked off of the bridge. Lashed out to reel him in again. This time, however, it rolled head. So that tendril went into the mouth and nose of Vlad, which was rather painful, but stopped him from dying or getting lost out in the ether. At this point, Aiden changed his tactics. Rather than trying to duel with the thing, which he couldn't land a blow that hurt it. The thing had 10 points of armor resistance from an armor charm that it had. He instead tried to grapple. The thing had 2 rods. He tried to grab one of the rods, and he succeeded. Found out that it was actually a part of his hand. It was part of the entire spirit. So then he tried to throw the spirit off of the bridge, but it was far too strong. He wasn't able to have enough success, and I rolled well enough for the spirit that it made any attempt to throw him look foolish. So Grace, the GM NPC, pulled out her harmony flute and used it to knock the Titanic opponent down to a knee, and she scooted by with it barely being able to swipe at her. The others took that as an opportunity and leaped past while it was not able to attack them as effectively. They rolled well to get around. It worked out that the group got by him except for Aiden. And when Aiden was grappling it, the thing was still flailing. Every time he tried something, the thing was able to strike at him with the other rod. Aiden took one of the best shots I had all night. The thing was like, he had the rod, and he had hooked it over his shoulder and was trying to throw the spirit. So the spirit had its rod, and it tried to go underneath and hit him in a sensitive area. And I hit. Oh, it was a great roll. He managed to soak, I believe it was a 9-point strike to his vitals. Someplace most male characters would not want to get hit. So that's going to go down in infamy. There was a loud dong. And, yeah, he was fine. For the most part, he only really got whacked once at the end, and it wasn't for that much damage. His soak really came through, and my dice were pretty cold tonight. So finally, he left, taking one last blow from behind, which knocked him into his group. It didn't send him off the bridge, because he was directly retreating away from the spirit, when he realized they didn't have to beat it. And they did. They got around it, which was as good as defeating it. They continued along. When they got to the zenith of the bridge, they found that in the midst of the top of the bridge there was this swirling vortex, an entropy spirit, that was just hit the bridge, found out that it was a construct of order, and wanted to destroy it. It was being attacked by loons, but ineffectually. Because it was too close to the new moon, the spirits didn't have much rage, so they had no teeth to fight back against the spirit. So it was just swatting them left and right. But it was trying to destroy the moon bridge, so the party had to get rid of it. So they attacked. And what they found out was, when Aiden attacked it with his claws, he did some damage, but it also, he had to make a stamina roll to avoid the entropy charm that the spirit had, which caused his skin to toughen, his fur to wither, his claws to get pitted and weakened. It made that attack less potent. Then Nathan came along with his Guru Honor Blade from the Get of Fenris, and he attacked it. And while he did, again, significant damage, it's a potent weapon. The rip of the around the hilt of the weapon crumbled. So now he's just holding the tang of the weapon, which is not a comfortable way to wield a blade by any stretch of the imagination. It increases the difficulty of him fighting with it. Also, it slightly affected his arm, but not as much because he didn't touch it directly. Then Peter hit it. And Peter was kind of the star of the night. He saved Nathan from flying off the bridge. Then when Vlad ran past and got knocked off, he saved Vlad. at the face. Remember how I said it was kind of puckish about where he got it? Well, he latched a tentacle into the face and pulled him up. Neither case did he do any real damage to his packmates. He just lassoed them. But he lashed into the entropy elemental, figuring it was one of his best weapons and it would work against the spirit. The entropy elemental didn't have any real willpower. It's just an agent of destruction, and it never really felt the need to stop itself from destroying things, so its willpower wasn't all that solid. Its attacks were relatively poorly directed, but powerful. It had lots of rage. Well, he lanced into it, and part of the ability of his tentacle is when it hits a supernatural construct, it can steal some of its power. So, unfortunately, this thing had a massive amount of power. So when he hit it, it drained off 10 points of power directly into his weapon, which now has turned him half black and half, well, Frenchman. Half of him appears unaffected, the other half is the black from this effect that he's got going on. And he started kind of encompassing this entropic power himself, which, you know, the power gaming part of him probably enjoyed, but there's also the realistic part that this may leave a permanent mark on him. You'll excuse me for having a sip or two. I've been talking all night. So, together, they all work together and they destroy the creature. It ends up costing them the wraps on both Nathan's get weapon. It also affects the fang dagger that Aiden pulled out and used against it. One other thing too, going back, the final blow that Aiden did to the aspect of Mars was he did hit it with the fang dagger. Once he figured out that the thing was only attacking when it was being attacked himself. So he decided he was going to attack it in one big blow. To be able to attack with the fang dagger and use it as a special ability, he had to use his Gnosis, which meant no extra attacks for rage. That's one of the things built in. You could do one big attack with that weapon, or you could do lots of separate attacks. He did one weapon and actually hurt the spirit a little bit, and then he decided it was time to leave. Well, this time he used it purely so that he wasn't going to have to directly touch the entropy elemental, and it cost him again the wraps on his dagger and caused it to decay a bit, so he's going to have the spirits rebound before it's at full effectiveness again. But all told, they managed to do significant damage, and then Peter, for the most part, ended up finishing it off with his Ebon Lance. So, they got their combats in, and it was a good night of fighting. For most of the night, they spent happily using their special abilities and talents against the creatures. And everybody in the group, for the most part, has some means of fighting. So, there wasn't a lot of time where anybody was really left with nothing to do. If another player character had been running Grace, for instance, instead of her just being a GM NPC, they might have been a bit bored. There wasn't a great deal for Grace to do, which is why that's her role. So they descend off the moon bridge, and eventually, after seeing a couple of other exotic sights and such, and they find out that where they're going is close to the Mississippi River, as I described it. They then moved out to the portal and found out that it was going to open up into a clearing in which there was a village of cobbled-together wood. Nothing that looked all that advanced. It looks fairly primitive. And upon further research, it looked like it was populated by the McColl, the shape-changers who are tied to reptiles. Their lupus version would be like a crocodile of some sort, or some sort of large lizard. Their Krynos form is more like a velociraptor or a bipedal dragon. And they can be very dangerous opponents. When they made their stealth roll, they actually popped out of the stealth bridge and just slid around the warder who was standing in the middle of the cairn. They all succeeded at that. They looked around, and it looked like there were a lot of kinfolk. There were several McColl. Probably more than they felt like they could fight. They also found some dead Garou that were hanging, as well as Garou kinfolk who were hanging on one side of the camp that the McColl were doing something to. They decided that they needed to just slip out of the camps and to avoid a fight. Well, that didn't work when Aiden didn't roll any successes. Wasn't a botch, but he didn't get the stealth he needed. So as he was going along, he suddenly got rained on. One of the kinfolk scouts of the McColl was relieving himself, and while Aiden was trying to creep by, he looked down and saw this huge white wolf that he had just peed on. Well, Aiden turned around and tried to silence the guard before he could set off an alarm, but moved simultaneously to the guard. So the guard did get off his cry, and Aiden wounded him. Again, the man can hit all day long. He can roll really well to hit. When it comes to damage, just can't seal the deal. So he merely wounded the poor guard. And then, of course, Peter turned around and used his weapon and drained him dry. Didn't get any supernatural powers for it, but he wasn't thirsty anymore. His weapon has a dark side to it. So they all turned to Lupus and they ran. The alert was on. They all ran out of the camp with angry McColl at their heels. Immediately they started making contested rolls. The McColl had fewer dice to roll because the Lupus are faster on open territory. On the other hand, the McColls were right in their native land, so they had fewer dice but a lower target number to roll for. It seemed like it was going to be fair, but as disaster can often happen in such circumstances, Grace immediately rolled 0 successes. So she wasn't able to go. The rest of them obviously were, trying to get as much distance as possible. She fell. And realistically, to kind of, seal the deal about how dangerous it is, she very likely would have been killed. Except that she has an ability that I rolled for at random during the St. Patrick's Day event, where she has the gift of camouflage. And since it's an at-will ability, all you have to do is sit still. I figured that she had at least a chance of being able to be undetected by the McColl, who were looking at the big white wolf and the ones that had murdered their kinfolk. They actually bypassed her. She got really lucky on that. She hid perfectly, and they bypassed her. The next one to make some poor rolls was Vlad. At this point, Nathan's character player had to leave, so I kind of tucked him out of harm's way for a little bit in case, unless the whole pack got in trouble. So it was mostly just 3 players who were at this point, 4 players who were at this point running on. They were rolling decently, but not well enough to really gain a lot of ground. Eventually, it became pretty obvious that even though he was really, really strong, Aiden was pretty likely to slow up the group. So Peter thought ahead, rolling a survival check, and decided that if they ran towards the river, they would have open ground along the banks and hopefully be able to run free. So they ran that way until Aiden rolled no successes. He was treed. He could not escape, just as 2 angry McColl in their giant crocodile forms crashed into the clearing, the rest of the group ready to help out. And that was where we ended. Quite the cliffhanger. The group ended up getting 5 experience for the night. Lots of combats. And, all in all, I think everybody had a lot of fun. It was a good time to let werewolves feel like they were werewolves. When it's all said and done, looks like they got a fight on their hands, at the very least, to get away from 2 McColl right off the bat. And if they don't get out quickly, they've got a lot of other ones coming up behind. So they better have a little haste to them. That was my report for the night, the state of the dungeon, for the 27th of April. And I hope you have safe travels from this point on.